NumismaTalks every second and fourth Thursday of the month at noon Mountain. We will be here with a new presentation. During this presentation, you may come up with questions. If you do, please use the Q&A button on your screen to send in your question, as all of you are muted during the presentation. Your question will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, David Schwager. David, did I just say that right?
That's great.
Okay. David has written for several numismatic publications, including The Numismatist, Coinage, Coin Week, and Fun Topics. He wrote the book, Sample Slabs, the definitive work on this numismatic specialty. David is known as an authority on certified coin holders or slabs and often consulted in this area. David lives in Fountain Valley, California, where he is president of the Orange County Coin Club. David today will be presenting Why We Want This Stuff, 8 views on the psychology of collecting. And David, I'm going to hand it off to you. I'm going to mute myself, but I'll be here. And if you need anything, I'll pop back on.
That sounds perfect. Thank you, Paula. And I appreciate the ANA giving me the opportunity to present here. So this talk is based on a article I wrote for Coin Week a couple of years ago. I'm going to be mentioning some sources. So if I mention a book and you say, hey, I want to see that, take a look at the Coin Week articles. So you go over to Coin Week and search on my name. So let me start out. Is anyone here a collector? I bet at least a few of us are. So as a collector, we want these certain objects very much. But why is that? Why are they important to us? It's a complicated topic. There's no one view. But I've done some research, and there's at least 8 possible reasons, which I'll go over briefly in this talk. You might like some of them. You might not like some of them. You'll definitely see yourself in some of them. They're not meant as authoritative pronouncements, but more several models we could find useful. But before we start, let me talk about one thing that is not part of the psychology of collecting, and that's addiction. So sometimes people say they're addicted to their hobbies, whatever those hobbies might be. But in all the reading I've done on the psychology of collection, I haven't found anyone who uses an addiction model to oversimplify what is addiction and compulsion. So there's the pleasure center of the brain, which is activated by accomplishments, something like winning the respect of someone who's important to you, or completing a task skillfully. Addictions and compulsions short-circuit this reward in which a substance or action gets you directly that reward without having to go through that accomplishment. There was a survey done decades ago, but I think it's still true, of 3,000 collectors, where 70% said they were addicted to their collections. But I think people say that mostly because it's a quick explanation. Sometimes people who don't share your hobby will say, well, why do you like that thing? Why do you like coin collecting? Why do you like fishing? Why do you like tennis? Whatever your hobby might be. You say, well, I'm addicted to it. I can't help. Sort of like those of us in collectibles sometimes say, it's about the money. I'm going to make money, that sort of thing. But if you think about it, there's no evidence that collecting changes the body's biochemistry in the way that addictions do. Also, one thing we see in addiction is that addicts try to stop compulsive gambling, compulsive shopping, alcoholism, and then repeatedly fail to stop doing that thing. We don't see that kind of behavior with collectors. So the madness of collecting, I'm happy to say, is not a madness of addiction, but of enthusiasm or even love. So what are the models that have been used? So pioneering psychologist Carl Jung thought that collecting was based on the hunting and gathering behavior of pre-agricultural societies. So hunter-gatherers would pile up possessions for security, pile up food against the winter, tools, furs to use as clothing, that kind of thing. And the most successful accumulators then were more likely to survive, pass their genes on to the next generation, meant that collecting behavior was rewarded. So that behavior is rewarded, so building up things feels good. The collector takes this hunter-gatherer impulse and then refines that to a more sophisticated and intellectual level. And we can all understand how it feels good to have more possessions. Like when your fridge is nice and well stocked with all kinds of good things, it's satisfying. Something else to support this is that notice if you collect one thing, you collect another thing. So if you want to have a conversation with a collector, always an interesting question is, what's the other thing to collect? So all of us here are numismatists. We're all interested in coins, currency, metal, etc. But I'm sure every one of you is thinking about right now, what's the other thing you collect? Is it toys? Is it sports cars? Is it wine? Is it books? I am sure there's one other thing. I'm a collector of art, for example. Mostly the California watercolors, one of my specialties, and I have a small collection of these First World War posters as well. That was number one. So number two is consumerism, or you might say the pinnacle or apotheosis of consumerism. This is a good source for this is the book Collecting in a Consumer Society by Russell Belk. And again, if you look at the article, you'll see all the books mentioned here. So we live in a consumer society where we're defined by our possessions. Now, you don't have to be a vain materialist to feel this way. All of us would probably, if we had a frayed shirt, for example, it fulfills the basic need of warmth and decency, but I think you'd probably put that shirt in the rag bag rather than let people see you in tattered clothes. So the collector both rejects and embraces consumer culture. The collector rejects consumerism because the collector does not buy disposable products that quickly lose their value. There's things like buying vacations or travel, which leaves you with only memories. Or I just bought some new furniture for my living room and it's now worth 10 cents on the dollar because the first time I sit on it. But at the same time, the collector embraces consumerism because we devote treasure and mind space to our possessions. There's a limit of how much care do you have, and a good amount of that caring goes to your possessions and collection. The collection can even become part of your identity, just like consumerism makes what you own, what you wear, part of your identity. Number three, to prevent and accept death. Good source for this is the book To Have and to Hold by Philip Wong. So we're all going to die. And we deal with our inevitable death by trying to create something that will live on beyond us. The biggest way this is done is through children, of course. So you have something that will literally live for decades after you do. But it's also done through our possessions. Here's a phrase, think about if you've heard that, and I'm sure you've heard this. I don't own this item. I am only the temporary custodian of it for future generations. We've all heard that, we all believe it, and it is true. If you're part of a chain of the owners of these antiques and collectibles, which then live on further. The elite collectors will even endow museums or try to, so that their collection can live on after. For example, take Henry Huntington, who was a rail baron who founded the Huntington Library that's near Los Angeles, one of the greatest collectors who ever lived, especially a book collector and an art collector. He founded his library so that his collection would never be broken up. It would stay intact forever. And he had himself, Henry and Arabella Huntington. Arabella was the art collector. Henry was the book collector. They had themselves buried at the library so they would never have to leave their beloved collections. That's true of many other elite collectors like Andrew Carnegie's fossil collection, which is enshrined at his museum that bears his name in Pittsburgh, or J. Paul Getty's art collection, which is at the museum that bears his name in Los Angeles, for example. But any collector has at least a little immortality in that we know that those things will live on after we're gone. Number four, connection with something larger. Best source for this is One Coin is Never Enough by Michael Shuddy. Like if you only read one book on the psychology of collecting, this is the one. And if you don't want to read the whole book, there's a abstract of it, a short version in the Numismatist, which you can look it up in your Numismatist subscription from a few years ago. So people want to be part of something bigger than themselves, the basic human need, part of a group, a religion, a tradition. The collectors often come into collecting because of their interest in history. If you own these objects that are connected to another time, another place, great events, great people, you are in some way connected to those and become part of something bigger than yourself. If I own a coin that has a portrait of Elizabeth I or a portrait of Alexander the Great, I am in some small way connected with those great rulers, those great figures in history. In the book, Michael Shuddy talks about buying a very worn 1793 chain set, one where you can just barely make out the details. You can see a few links of that chain. But that's for him a connection with the early American Republic, those early days of the US Mint, when our great nation was just getting off the ground. Number 5 is mastery. They also discuss this in One Coin is Never Enough. So the world, it's large, it's uncaring, and much of it is random. But a collector owns and controls a small part of that world. The collector is like the homeowner with the perfect lawn. The world outside disappoints with its dirt, its disarray. But for those few square yards of carefully manicured turf, the owner is the undisputed lord and master who has complete control over that small area of perfection. The collector is master of the collection because he decides on the rules of the collection, acquires the object, arranges them, documents them, and protects them. You also achieve mastery through knowledge and expertise. All of us have studied our collecting area. Most of us have a specialty. And there's a good chance that in your area of specialty, you know far more than most other people. You probably in your area of specialty know far more than most other collectors. My niche is sample slabs. Coin holders, certified coin holders, or slabs colloquially, but especially sample slabs that were given out as gifts or free samples by the grading service. In this tiny area, which almost nobody cares about, I know more than anyone else in the world. And that small achievement is intensely satisfying. All of us can be masters of our own area. Number 6 is dealing with loss. The best book for this is Collecting an Unruly Passion by Werner Munsterberger, who is himself an art collector. Collecting an Unruly Passion is the most quoted book on the psychology of collecting, but I wish it wasn't. So Munsterberger's view is rooted in classical psychology. So the way he sees it is that the collecting impulse goes back to infancy. So a baby realizes that he or she is separate from the mother. And they have this shock of realizing that they are in some ways alone and away from that necessary comfort they need for survival. So a baby reaches out for a comfort object, usually something soft and comforting, a blanket or a soft toy. That comfort object then gives the baby temporary relief, but that relief only lasts as long as they have the object and needs to be renewed. So as an adult, this temporary relief from anxiety and discomfort and loneliness can be cured in part by acquiring a new object. That new object then becomes your comfort and it gives you temporary relief from all the uncertainties of the world. However, it has to be repeated because that object's comfort does not last forever. So Munsterberger backs this up with stories of obsessive collectors who neglected their fortunes and their families in favor of their beloved collections. This idea is unappealing because it sees collecting as essentially pathological and compulsive. But it's not totally wrong. I mean, it is true that for a collection to be alive, you do have to keep renewing. If you have a collection that you're not adding to, that collection is dead. And Sigmund Freud, who was himself a collector of antiquities, particularly objects from ancient Egypt, said a collection in which there is no new additions is dead. For example, I have a collection of Morgan dollars that my grandmother gave me, but I wouldn't say I'm a collector of silver dollars. I simply have these 40 pieces. They're safe in the safe deposit box, and I either have no intention of adding or subtracting. Whereas the things that I'm avidly collecting, like paintings or rare slabs, I am a collector of those things. Also, another way that this is accurate, if we look at consumerism, the idea behind consumerism is that the next object is the one that will make me happy. And the reason that we keep believing, even though this is not totally true, we keep believing in consumerism because sometimes it works, and it always works temporarily. Still, I like to think that my desire is more of love and enthusiasm rather than compulsion. Still an interesting model to keep in mind. Number 7, the joy of buying. I don't have an authority for this. This one's my own idea. You love shopping. Now, you might say, I don't like shopping. I hate shopping. But we all like shopping. Now, if you say you don't like shopping, it probably means you don't like going to the mall to go pick up clothes and shoes. And I understand that. But every one of us likes going to a place where interesting items are for sale and browsing through those. It could be the antique mall. It could be our favorite thing, the coin convention. It could be a hardware store where you're looking at something for your next home product. And in each of those cases, it's enjoyable to look through interesting things that are for sale. Sometimes collecting, it's simply the joy of buying. We've all bought something because we say it's an interesting thing, and then we say it's only some price that's below our pain point. It's only $10, it's only $100, or whatever that point is in your case. We certainly all have objects like this. And going to a coin show with friends, sharing your purchases and stories at the end, it can be one of the best days of the year. Going on buying trip, it's just fun. Number 8, return to childhood. At the 2016 ANA, I went to a seminar given by author Steve Roach. And he asked, he said, raise your hand if you started collecting between the ages of 6 and 11. Almost every hand went. Collecting behavior peaks at about age 10. Nearly all children have a collection of some type. It could be interesting things that they pick up around the house or on the ground, interesting stones, bird feathers, bottle caps. It could be something that's given to them. It could be toys. It could be books. Almost every child has some kind of collection. Toy makers often appeal to this by making a series of similar toys in slightly different variations with a numbered checklist. So you might have a toy maker make a number of little plastic animals, each one of which is a little bit different, and then a checklist so you can try to get every one of those toys. We start collecting as children. There's a common pattern where we start collecting as kids, give that up when we discover more teen or adult things. And like when I got my first car, I lost interest in coin collecting. I got my car and a girlfriend, and I lost interest in coin collecting. And then, like most, I followed that pattern where I resumed collecting in middle age, or sometimes we resume collecting and retire, or you resume collecting once the children leave the house and you have more spare time and money. So what we'll usually do is return to those things that appealed to us when we were a child. You've all heard collectors say, I'm buying the thing that I wish I had when I was a kid. Like when I was a little kid, I always wanted an '09 SVDB set. They're not rare. Every coin shop has one, but when I finally bought one when I was in my 40s, it was a childhood dream realized. Also think about how many collectibles are childish things collected by adults. Some of the most popular categories of collectibles are things like comic books, dolls, toys, or sports cards, all things which are originally intended for children. Uh, Also, if you get to one nice thing about collectibles, you get to show them off to people, so you get to revisit the childish joy of show and tell. And most of us look back on our childhood fondly and want to return to it. So those were the 8 views on the psychology of collecting. You can see a psychology of collecting, it's a complex topic, and there is no one answer. Why do we want this stuff? It's hard to say, but I know for certain that you and I do. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much for presenting that. For those of you that don't know, David presented this money talk as a money talks in Pittsburgh. So we didn't get to record it. So I asked him here there's a lot of interest when we were in Pittsburgh. So we do have a few questions. So I'm going to read those out and you can try answering. So the recent best-selling book, The Art Thief by sorry, I apparently need my glasses. By Finkel, tries to make the case that collecting is a borderline psychological disorder. Have you read the book and what are your thoughts?
No, I haven't. I don't know about that one. There's a little bit of truth to that. There is such a thing as compulsive collecting. And in addition to reading about, so I don't have any training or education in psychology. I'm simply someone who read several books and is going to tell you what I learned. But in addition to reading about the psychology of collecting, I've also read about hoarding. They're not the same. Collectors are sometimes accused of being hoarders, but there's a difference. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, yes, he's a collector too. He said the difference between a collector and a hoarder is a collector. Collectors are proud of their things and want to show them to you. Hoarders are ashamed of their things and want to hide them from you. But they are related. And there is such a thing as compulsive collectors who spend their fortune. Yet I found so much joy in collecting, the collecting life, that it's very hard to see it as a pathology. Maybe the people who see collecting as a pathology are following the too much of a good thing fallacy. You can take anything that's positive and say it's too much of a good thing. Eat your vegetables. Well, should I eat nothing but vegetables and stuff myself with cucumbers all day? No, that would be too much of a thing. You should exercise. Should I spend all day in the gym? No, that would be too much of a good thing. Now, I don't agree that collecting is pathological, but there's a little bit of truth in it. You're not totally wrong.
Okay. The next one is, I've heard several theories on why most collectors are men versus women. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great topic. If I had to say just one thing, it's because if you're a collector, you have to care very deeply about things. And as a broad generalization, women care more about people and men care more about things. So that is the short answer.
I think you had that question in Pittsburgh too. I feel like that was familiar.
It's a good question. Yes.
Yeah. Somebody asked if you could repeat number 1.
Oh, number 1 was hunting gathering. So that was Carl Jung's view. He's a psychologist from the early 1900s you've heard of. So he thought that hunter-gatherers, people who lived before agriculture, had to pile up things so they would survive. Therefore, people who have the impulse to pile up useful things were more likely to pass their genes on. Therefore, the collecting impulse was positive and reinforced by evolution. So if I was a hunter-gatherer and I had a big pile of acorns in my cave, I'd be more likely to survive the winter. Now, as a collector, I have a pile of shiny, beautiful things, and that gives me pleasure.
Okay. Why do younger generations not seem interested in collecting?
I don't think that's true. There is a whole new crop of young collectors. Now, you have to go to the right place to see them, because when I go to coin conventions, every time there's all these young guys who are about 15 to 25 years old who come up to me and say, "Hey, I know you from Instagram." So there is a whole crop of young collectors, which is on the way up. If you at the conventions, there's a lot of bright young dealers. There's some of these young men I deal with, and I didn't find out until I'd done a few deals and sent them some serious money and serious stuff that they're some are teenagers or college students. So I don't think that's true. Also, one thing to keep in mind is every time someone says kids these days, everyone's been saying kids these days since ancient times. What might be true though, and what you're saying is definitely true up to a point, is that the types of collectibles and the way people collect are constantly changing. So I definitely think that that is true. So you might have someone who's young who collects something that you and I don't think is worthy of collecting, but they're avidly after it. So newer collecting categories, for example, like sneakers or video games, that's just as valid a collectible as someone who collects something more old-fashioned and sophisticated, like collecting books or wine, right?
Yeah, great. Let's see. In the collecting world, there seems to be an ever-present debate about whether it is literally a part of our DNA. What do you think? You talked a little bit about that, I feel like.
I did. Everyone enjoys buying. Everyone enjoys shopping. Everyone enjoys getting new things and having beautiful things in their house. So yes, I'd say collecting is part of a human nature. The only difference is the serious collector takes what everyone does and maybe makes it a bit more sophisticated and intellectual, maybe even making it part of their identity. So yes, I think collecting is an art.
I don't know if you can answer this. Why do we like coins instead, for example, stamps?
Yeah, I mean, people want to be polite and ask you about your hobby. Often they'll say, "Oh, why do you like that thing? Oh, what is it you like about sports cars? You know, what do you like about art, right, or something like that?" Often the thing itself has an appeal to it, but really often it's the emotions behind that thing. So it's whatever provokes a particular emotion in you, that connection to your childhood, that connection to history, a connection to something bigger than yourself. As for the particular choice of collectible, yeah, that's something that has some connection. So for the stamp collector, maybe they used to love getting a postcard in the mail. Whereas the sports collector, maybe I remember watching baseball games with my family when I was a little kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this one, some people say they collect for the friendships they make and have in the hobby. It wasn't on your list. Why not?
Yeah, that was, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's my bonus number 9 out of 8. If someone mentioned it, which is community and belonging. When people ask me what I like about coins, I don't tell them I'm addicted. I don't tell them for the money. I don't tell it's for history. I say, my favorite thing about coins is the people. My favorite thing is the people. The second favorite thing is the knowledge. The third favorite thing is the objects themselves. My friends are collectors. I spend time with collectors. I run a coin club locally. That's my summer vacation, is to go to the ANA each year. Some people go to the mountains, some people go to the beach. I go to the coin convention as my summer vacation. So absolutely, the best part of it is the people.
Somebody wanted to say they liked your posters behind you.
Yes.
Then this is the last one right now. It says, on the same vein of the question on why men are more attracted to coin collecting versus women, do you see, is there any reason why coin collecting is more dominated by white men and women as opposed to people of color?
Well, America's about 70% white, so that's one reason.
Yeah.
Coin collecting is
that's a little touchy subject. Feel free to not answer if you don't want to.
Yeah, here. Coin collecting, it's definitely has been for a long time quite a democratic broad hobby. This started in the 1930s when coin boards came out. And coin collecting went from being something that was pursued mostly by richer, more educated people who were a little more sophisticated and collected mostly ancient European coins, to people who had a casual hobby of collecting coins out of pocket change. And those collectors went on, many, to become serious collectors. And I think coin collecting in some ways is going back to being a little bit more of an upscale hobby. It's always going to be the most popular type of collectible because it's so easy to get started in. You can start with no money, no space, and no knowledge by pulling stuff out of pocket change. But I'd say that coin collecting does appeal a little bit to people who are a little bit older, and maybe the reason is that's the key demographic reason, is that it appeals to people who are a little bit older, and everyone else that you're talking about is going to come up in a few decades. So we'll see more and more collectors who started as little kids when they were pulling state quarters out of change in 2005. And then in 2040, we're going to see those kids who are going to be demographically very diverse showing up at the coin convention.
Great answer. Great answer. You handled that very well. Why do some countries collect more than others?
Let's see. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, coin collecting is big here in America. Canada and Germany are probably some of the biggest collecting, although people will collect coins absolutely everywhere. The first coin collector started 1 minute after the first coin was made.
Yeah,
that was quite a while ago. Say,
it's okay to not have an answer for that.
I do not really have a good question. Partly, sometimes it's just an accident how things got started. There are collectors of various things in every place. I know here in the US, it was really the invention of coin boards, folders, and albums that started around 1935 that made coin collecting cheap and accessible. You started seeing folders and boards sold in 5 and dimes and drugstores. This led to a large number of casual collectors, which then eventually some of those people decided to become serious collectors. So that's the question here in the US. Why that's just as true. Maybe that's just as true in Canada, because Canada takes over from, is so influenced by US culture. Other countries around the world, I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah. This is just a comment. I'm a coin collector myself and a clinical psychologist for over 35 years. Great to hear that this debate is going on. So just a appreciation. In Brazil, we are currently having a new wave of children and teenagers collecting, and a women's movement that started in 2017 with 5 women collectors, and now they sum up to 60. So diversifying, I guess.
That's good.
Yeah. And then as to the different countries' preference for collecting coins, a large part of it can be the standard of living and disposable income. Just another comment there. So
yeah, that's also part of it.
Yeah.
Have enough money that you can afford to put a few pieces aside.
Right. All right. That's all our questions. So I want to just thank you again, David, and remind everybody to check our website at money.org under events and e-learning to see what's coming up next. And I just want to say thank you and have a great day. Thanks again, David.
Thank you so much.